Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the very first episode of For the Diaspora. My name is Benjamin, and I will be your host throughout this journey. The reason I started this podcast or talk show is because I feel like Black people in the diaspora are starting to lose touch of where they come from. We should not forget where we come from, wherever you are, be it, you're in the UK, you're in the US, you're in Germany, Canada, Norway, whether or not you were born there, whether or not, you're a first, second, third generation immigrant, you have to know where your root is. You have to be in tune with your culture. I mean, the Black culture is the most celebrated culture in the world. So let us as Black people learn how to be proud of it as we hopefully continue to celebrate, Black love in diaspora, we have to remember our roots, because it's something different, celebrating Black love, and also something different, understanding where that Black love is rooted in. So we have to always look back to where we come from, our hometown. So basically, I'm simply here to be one of the bridges that link the Black diaspora to their African and Caribbean roots. I was born in Nigeria, grew up there, only came to the United Kingdom when I was about 13, a couple years ago. Um, so yeah, that's basically why I started this little introduction. But today is going to be a history lesson, and we'll be talking about Berlin Conference. I believe to fully understand colonization in Africa, we need to talk about Berlin Conference and we need to understand what Berlin Conference is. So, what is Berlin Conference? Berlin Conference, also known as the Congo Conference or West African Conference, was a conference that was organized by Otto von Bismarck, the first Chancellor of Germany, which regulated European colonization and trade in Africa. African colonization had already begun prior to the Berlin Conference. The Berlin Conference was simply a meeting to discuss and establish international guidelines and avoid violent disputes between the European countries involved. So let's talk about why the Berlin Conference was organized in the first place. So prior to the Berlin Conference, European countries were simply forming trade relationships with local chiefs. But in 1876, King Leopold II of Belgium founded and controlled the International African Association, or in full, International Association for the Exploration and Civilization of Central Africa, which, according to King Leopold, society was meant to help spread Christianity and civilization to Central Africa. I will probably do a video on International African Association. I will probably dive more deep into it because it's quite interesting. But if you want more knowledge on King Leopold II, I'll put a video in the link below. The guy kind of went more in depth on King Leopold, and he kind of went in depth in the whole International Africa Association. It was quite an interesting watch. I was I learned a lot. Turns out this guy was a, I don't even know. I don't know why basically King Leopold is so bad. I don't know why he's not being mentioned, or at least in the same conversation with Hitler, because the things this guy did to Congolese people, it was bad. So please just check it out. It's quite an interesting watch. But anyway, back to our conversation and our history lesson. But in secret, King Leopold II had recruited Henry Morton Stanley to help establish what would later be known as the Congo Free State. So basically, what I'm saying is King Leopold II, he wanted a country to himself. He didn't want anyone, not even the Belgian state, to be involved. He claimed he was funding all the humanitarian efforts from his own pocket. No one really batted an eye to his plans because previous expedition reports had already stated that the Central African region was filled with thick forests with wild animals and rivers with man-eating crocodiles. So initially, no one really cared about what King Leopold II was doing, but the French intelligence soon learned about his actual plans. So the French launched their own colonial expedition, then Portugal launched theirs, then Britain launched theirs, and Germany, feeling left out, launched their own expedition. Leopold II sensed the developing conflict and convinced France and Germany that it's best they all trade together in Africa. Portugal and Britain was like, calm, say no more. So Otto von Bismarck called on representatives from 13 nations in Europe as well as the United States to take part in the Berlin Conference. So there was a lot of things that went down in Berlin Conference. There was a lot of guidelines, a lot of things that were set in place, but there were two that kind of stood out to me. So one of the general acts that was agreed on in the Berlin Conference, one of them was any fresh act of taking possession of any portion of African coast would have to be notified by the power taking possession or assuming a protectorate to the other signatory powers. So basically, before anything is done, before you take a claim of land or you take a you take a place for yourself, you have to let the rest of the 12 other countries know that this is what you're doing before you do anything, which I find quite interesting. The second one, definition of regions in which each European power had an exclusive right to pursue the legal ownership of that land, no matter how they get about it, by force or by crook. So basically, once you define a region where you want, once you've let everyone know, you could do whatever you want, however you want it, wherever you want it. Kill as many people as you want to take control of that land. No one will bat an eye. Anyway, I just find it quite interesting. Before the Berlin Conference, Europe owned, well, kind of didn't really own, but they claimed about 10% of Africa, most of which were coastal regions that were used as ports for ship travel and, trade, things like that. Before the conference, Africa was known as the Dark Continent, which is not in reference to the people, but in reference to how little was known about it. After the conference, however, Europe owned 90% of Africa. So basically, before the conference, Africa was chilling. After the conference, only Ethiopia and a few other states managed to not be colonized. So basically, that is basically it. That's a general kind of overbrief of the Berlin Conference. I didn't want to go too deep and bore you guys, but I just wanted you to kind of see exactly where all this started. But to be honest, from my own research, colonization of Africa was just a penis measuring contest. Most European countries had no idea the resources that were in Africa. After colonization and they realized the wealth in Africa, they simply could not leave, not even till today. So I'm just saying all this and trying to give us this history lesson because we have to learn what Africa was prior to colonization. We have to know our history. We need to be taught our history. Growing up in Nigeria, the history I was being taught was still were not the history of Nigeria. We were still being taught the colonial history. We were still being taught about Mungo Park. And I can't even remember these people, but people that had nothing to do with us. So I want us to know our own history. So before colonization, we had kingdoms, we had dynasties, we had empires. In North Africa, there was the Senussi dynasty in modern day Libya, or the Sultanate of Sennar in modern day Sudan. In East Africa, there was the Kingdom of Jimma in modern day Ethiopia, or Kingdom of Urundi in modern day Burundi. In West Africa, there was the Aro Confederacy in modern day Nigeria, or the Asante Union in modern day Ghana. In South Africa, there was the Zulu Kingdom in modern day South Africa, or the Roswy Empire in modern day Zimbabwe. Okay, so now I'm not claiming all these kingdoms lived peacefully and happily together. We know about the Zulu and the South wars. Hopefully, I didn't I didn't butcher that. I've been trying to learn the clicking thing. Trust me, I spent at least 10 minutes trying to learn how to do that before this video, and hopefully I didn't butcher that. Sorry, guys. But I'm not saying they all lived happily together. I'm just trying to make sure we do not believe the lies that we were told, that we were all savages and animals and were barbarians. We were uncivilized. We were kings. We were queens. We need to remember that the richest man to ever live was an African man, King Musa the First of Mali. So we need to remember our culture. We need to look back. We need to remember our history. So that is why I'm doing this podcast, talk show, whatever you want to call it. I'll be having different people on from different places, from different countries, and we'll just learn. That's all I want us to do. Learn about each other because um, for Africa to be great, I believe for Africa to be great, there's two things that need to happen. One, there needs to be unity. We can't be doing this whole. I know it's banter when Nigeria and Ghana fight over, jollof rice and all that. It's funny, but in all seriousness, we can't be doing this infighting between us. And two, I believe that the Black diaspora has a huge role to play in African revolution. I 100% believe so. So anyway, that's where I will stop for today. Thanks for listening to For the Diaspora. I will see you guys next time.